Hello guys and welcome to this Vue Meetup online event. My name is Simone Cuomo and I'm a software engineer at Digital Labs. Our sponsor today is Digital Labs, your partner in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. Find out more at digitallabs.com or send us an email at hi@disdot.com. There are a couple of announcements to do before we start on. As you know, Digital Labs is very busy and they provide loads of different events. So just have a look at all these wonderful events. We got the Triangle Modern Web on May 28th, Angular International Women's Day on May 29th, and then we got Angular, React, and Vue Meetup, as a monthly meetup. So it's great to come around. Don't forget that this month is the State of Redux. So it's a very great event, and if you are interested in React, is one probably to join. Today's speakers are going to be Jack and Thorsten. Jack is going to be our first speaker and is the lead software engineer at Greenman Gaming, and Thorsten is the product owner at MVV Dynamic. Sorry if I read it incorrectly, and is also part of the Vue core team. The schedule is as such. We are going to introduce ourselves as I've just done now. As with everything, guys, don't forget that I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So if you got any questions, please ask the question throughout the session. And then when the session finishes, the speaker is going to choose some of the question to answer. So don't hesitate to be there. If you need anything, I will be in chat as well. So after this little welcome, these few slides that just completed, Jack is going to start with his talk that he's creating a Twitch extension with front-end, back-end, and analytics. And then Thorsten is going to show his PowerPoints about accessibility barebones component with Vue 3, and an insight into work in progress. And then at the very end, we're going to finish it off at 4:20 to just closing notes, some question, and and just finishing off this fantastic event. So without further ado, it's time for Jack to take over the screen. And amazing.
Okay.
So Jack, can you start sharing your screen?
Fantastic. Yep. No problem.
Okay.
Great. Bear with me. Bear with me. Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. This presentation is creating extensions with Vue in mind, with covering aspects such as the front end, back end, and analytics. So hopefully after this presentation, you'll be prepared for your next Twitch and AWS hackathon. These kind of occasionally happen every couple of months, half a year, but I think everyone should really get involved. And this presentation is really going to help you use Vue to create your Twitch extension. Who am I? I am Jack McGuire. I'm the lead software engineer at Greenman Gaming. My day job, really, I'm a backend developer. I'm not really a full stack developer, but I have primarily worked previously in startups and for other organizations. However, I had never really grown my portfolio or had like a public kind of work to show future employers. And so over 2019, it was my kind of New Year's goal, should I say, to kind of really expand my portfolio, get my GitHub out there, some projects that people can look at and actually see that I'm a reasonably okay developer. Now, back in December 2018, Twitch and AWS, or Amazon, should I say, announced the Twitch Extensions Challenge for 2019. And I released and developed an extension part of this hackathon, to which I've kind of continued to maintain ever since the release in the 26th of February. And funny enough, because of the situations or circumstances that we are currently in, because of COVID-19, the amount of viewers or users watching streamers on Twitch is phenomenally grown by a huge amount. And broadcasters who use my Twitch extension, which I'll go into a little bit of detail in a second as to what extensions are, has seen the usage rate of my own extension or the user base increase phenomenally. As per se in these bullet points, I'm having at least 600 daily concurrent users per day. Over April, I got 1.8 million views of my Twitch extension and 40,000 unique users interacting with my Twitch extension over April 2020. At the bottom right, you can find all of my social contacts, social media, bits and pieces. Please feel free to reach out. I will answer questions towards the end of the session, but please feel free to leave comments as we go. So, what is a Twitch extension? A Twitch extension is a web page that sits inside Twitch, which aims to improve the viewer or broadcaster experience. As an example, part of the hackathon, the Twitch extension hackathon, there was a Twitch extension called Hearthstone Deck Tracker, which is an interactive interface which sits on top of a broadcaster's video stream. Kind of like you guys are watching me now, there'll be kind of like a nice overlay on the video that's interactive. And this would allow Twitch viewers to actually inspect and play around with the virtual deck or the virtual trading cards that the Twitch stream was using in their video game. Twitch extensions, there are 3 types of them that Twitch supports. There's something called a panel extension, and this kind of sits just below a user's profile page in the kind of profile bio section. There's an overlay extension that kind of sits on top of the video, as I've kind of just talked about. And there's also something called a component extension that kind of displays as part of the video, taking up part of the screen as well. So what are the components of a Twitch extension? So Twitch, the primary website, provides content hosting and also has a special supervisor, which I'll kind of talk about in a second. Twitch also hosts something called an extension helper JavaScript library. Here, we also have the front-end component. This will be our Vue.js application. And we also have the third component of 3 different things, but they're kind of grouped up together because they're kind of more server-side, and that is an EBS, which essentially is a backend service that's hosted by you that would either serve requests or just do some business logic. Now, this is optional. You don't necessarily have to have a backend to have a Twitch extension, but I'll go into some more detail why after some changes in the last few months as to why you probably might need one these days. There's also something called TCS, or Twitch Configuration Service. It's an optional data store that's accessible by something called the extension helper, which I'll talk about in a second. And there's also the Twitch PubSub service, and it's a way to kind of broadcast real-time messages to your Twitch extension. So this image here I've kind of stolen from the Twitch website, the developer documentation, but I'll kind of briefly, and it kind of nicely shows what really is going on within the Twitch extension ecosystem. So first of all, we have the Twitch Supervisor, which is kind of like it's a service that will host your Vue application. So basically your front end code will be hosted by Twitch once you've uploaded it. So basically you have the Twitch website, which will then load your front end Twitch extension within an iframe. Your Twitch extension would import the extension helper library, which provides additional functionality, which we'll talk about in a second. And what will happen is your front end application will talk to a backend service, as much as you do in like normal web apps, and your backend will kind of communicate with either the Twitch API or this Twitch PubSub component to kind of keep up to date the applications. So the extension supervisor located at supervisor.ext extension twitch.tv, when the kind of broadcaster profile page loads up, Twitch will embed the extension supervisor and sends a message to the supervisor indicating what extension to load. So be it the Hearthstone extension or my own extension, or perhaps even yours. The supervisor generates a content security policy iframe source directive that prevents the extension from loading anything other than extension. This is basically nothing malicious or dodgy that could affect the actual Twitch website or the broadcast experience. And then we'll place the extension within the iframe on the Twitch website. It's, like I said, it kind of prevents any bad actors from making an extension load content which doesn't match the Twitch guidelines. The Twitch extension helper is hosted by Twitch, and it's something you have to import within your Vue.js project. It's very, very important, otherwise your Twitch extension won't match the Twitch guidelines. But some of the things this Twitch library does is it provides authentication. Twitch used this JSON Web Tokens functionality to kind of help authenticate user requests. These tokens kind of contain user information, who the user is, and some bits of other things. The Twitch library also helps you with actions. So for instance, it'll be where the user might click a certain button within your extension that might help detect using bits, which is kind of like a monetization thing, or following the channel, and a few other kind of webhooks you kind of can link into. This library helps you access something called the Twitch configuration service, which I'll talk about very soon. It also provides access to features, so feature flags, so it's particular extension settings. So it could be like dark theme mode, or does the broadcaster, have they reached like what they call on Twitch something called an affiliate, where because the user has a certain amount of followers, they become an affiliate, and being an affiliate allows Twitch broadcasters to monetize their platform. So you can start using, or viewers can start donating bits, which is kind of like a currency that Twitch uses on their website. And there's also the Twitch helper also allows you to listen for pub sub events that will be kind of sent from your EBS or backend. The Twitch configuration service is an optional thing to use, but I do highly recommend it. So it's an optional configuration service data store for your Twitch extension. Your extension can access the Twitch function configuration directly if you have decided to enable it within your Twitch extension settings on the Twitch developer dashboard. You can access this via the Twitch JS helper, so you can easily access configuration in your Vue.js project. Using this Twitch configuration service really helps reduce the calls to your backend service, because no longer do you have to go to your backend to fetch user information or any kind of stuff you would store in a database, in a sense, because you're storing it using this Twitch service. The configuration is split into segments. The Twitch configuration service uses something called a global segment, and this is where all instances of your extension have access to this global data store, and it's very much so. No matter what broadcaster you're viewing on Twitch, your extension will show that same configuration. So you might use it for, I don't know, domain names or anything useful that your extension needs to load up or use generically. And you also have the broadcaster and developer segments, which are specific configurations for that broadcaster a viewer is watching on Twitch. So it might be particular theme colors, font background colors that the broadcaster has used or chosen themselves to match their own branding. So it's specifically for that broadcaster. Do be aware though that the Twitch configuration service will be exposed by the Twitch extension JavaScript helper. And because it is JavaScript, it's actually accessible by the developer consoles on Google Chrome as such. So do not store any credentials or anything secretive via this Twitch configuration service. Otherwise, it will be exposed. People will be able to get it from or extract it out from developer consoles and whatnot. So it's wise not to store access tokens or anything your extension might use to communicate with third-party services. The Twitch pub sub I kind of mentioned earlier is a system that provides an additional channel for your EBS to communicate with your extension. Your extension front end can use Ajax to directly call to your EBS to retrieve initial state or send viewer-initiated events like voting. PubSub is a very efficient way for the EBS to directly broadcast real-time events or provide incremental state changes simultaneously to all instances of your extension. Typical use case, your EBS will use the send extension PubSub message endpoint to broadcast the message to your viewers. Your extension front end will use the extension helper to listen to incoming messages. So it's very much like if I wanted to send a message to everyone on Twitch that has my extension loaded. My backend service would ping the Twitch API, which will send a message via this Twitch pub sub. And my Vue.js application would read the incoming messages from the Twitch extension helper and then do whatever with them. I do have an example coming up. Yeah. So basically, when I started the hackathon back in 2019, I kind of fished around as to what front-end frameworks I should use. And I kind of came across Vue.js. It's the first time I'd ever heard of it. And I saw many other comments saying it's easier to learn than React and so on and so forth. And I couldn't really find any good starter templates to really get started with the Twitch extension. So I kind of, the real purpose of this talk here really is to help everyone else that was potentially interested in getting into Twitch development and really helping them get their foot through the door. Because it was a real struggle for me. I found some some Vue.js projects for Twitch extensions, but they were using Webpack and all sorts of configuration I'd never dealt with before, and it was all a bit tedious. And so I kind of decided that I would make a template for everyone here to start using to help them get on board with developing Twitch extensions. And I kind of quickly, hopefully do a demonstration if I've got time to actually running this project. So basically this starter template Twitch extension will be a panel extension. It will show below a user's profile. This will be, okay, for instance, it will show in the below area. So yeah, as you can see, a Twitch panel extension is somewhere that would show on a user's profile bio. So obviously you can see all the information about me as a streamer. Not that I do stream, but it's just an example of what an average Twitch broadcaster's profile kind of looks like. And this is my Twitch extension here. So we're going to be running the project, this Vue starter template, and actually trying to get it run on the Twitch website via running locally. Bear with me. So first things first, this project contains two things. It contains the client, which will be the front end Vue.js application. And we also have an EBS, which is a serverless backend developed in Go and also using some AWS technologies called AWS SAM CLI. I'm not sure how familiar some of you are with backend technologies, but the serverless kind of upcoming thing is definitely being used a lot more these days for the backend kind of stuff. So I kind of really thought, for some of you who are primarily front-end developers, that you should have a bit of an insight as to what really goes on these in the modern backend kind of technologies. So this is a good example to kind of start nitpicking. And a great way to do it, I thought, would be with a Twix extension. Anyway, moving forward. You're all kind of very familiar with how a Vue.js project looks in terms of the structure. You have a source file, some configuration. I'm not one to really use CLI commands. I very much appreciate GUI kind of tools, and I use the Vue UI a lot more than anything else. So to get started, simply clone the repo, go into the client directory, npm install as you would on any of the kind of front Vue.js project, and simply run the Vue UI. Twitch extensions do usually, they will require you to set up a Twitch developer account, and you will need to set up an extension configuration on your developer dashboard. I haven't really gone into too much detail about how to do that in these slides, unfortunately, but it's kind of something to kind of take away and have a look at in yourself. But usually what you'll find on your developer console is kind of all the settings you need to set up in order to get your Twitch extension going, such as like asset file hosting. And because we're producing a panel extension, we set particular settings and where broadcasters would configure the pages that broadcasters, when configuring the extension, would be viewing. So like config.html, live config.html, and the main view would be panel.html. So very quickly, I like using the Vue. I'm hoping some of you are very familiar with this kind of dashboard. Once you've cloned the repo, you've done npm install, you should be able to see this and very much make sure all the dependencies are up to date. Nothing should be really breaking, but I usually prefer going to tasks, and the serve task is already running. I'll quickly stop it to rerun it. But yeah, so basically I configure it so that it's running on localhost on a specific port, and make sure that the HTTPS option is enabled. There will be some of you will probably prefer to use the CLI itself, but it's easier for me just to use the GUI. So I've now kicked off the task to start running the front end of the project. So as you're kind of familiar, in source, you'll have main.js, which kind of load all the necessary assets. There's a Vue mix in here. That'll be a globally wide available functions. And we also have a router. Now, as I kind of showed you on the Twitch developer dashboard before, you have a panel.html, config.html, and live config.html. And using the Vue CLI webpack config, I define that when I build my project, instead of just using routes, I'm actually creating pages. So we've got the panel config and live config HTML files. And these all point to the Twitch template HTML. And here you'll find that we load the Twitch extension helper, as I was talking about before, Google Analytics, and a Vue remote debugging program. The kind of basically it's the Vue Chrome extension, but it's just as a web app instead. And I'll talk about later why that's needed when testing with Twitch. moving on. So I believe we are now running the project. Yeah, and it's all good. It's running. And basically, when we load up a Twitch broadcasters page, we'll be running the panel.view. And basically, all this is really going to do is it will be pinging the EBS for Twitch followers, getting the total and all the followers for the user that we're viewing, and display them in a Bootstrap view table. Okay. So we are running the front end now, but with this project, like I said, the Vue app does talk to an EBS or backend, which we will be going to run locally. It takes a few seconds to get running if you haven't set it up before, but yeah. So within the Vue.js project in source API, we have the kind of interaction with the backend. And also the Twitch extension helper. So we have config.js here, which helps to interact with the Twitch configuration service via the Twitch extension helper.js. So as you see here, I'm kind of accessing the window, the JavaScript imported from Twitch, and I'm simply fetching the configuration, and I'm getting the global, the developer, and broadcaster different levels of the extension configuration segments. Moving forward, so I've got my front end running now, and now I'm going to show you very quickly how easy it is to run the back end, the EBS. I know you guys probably aren't backend developers. However, this project, like I said, is done in Golang, serverless Golang, and it requires you to probably have a couple of tools, AWS SAM, and Go installed on your machines. But simply, I have a make file within this repo, or directory, should I say, and you literally run one command, and then the backend will start running locally. So literally in my environment, all I have to run is make run API. Now the AWS SAM tool will look at something called a template, a YAML template. So I have backend API here, and I'm running a serverless function, and I'm running or broadcasting on the /followers URL. So I have a domain here, which is my EBS domain, running locally on port 3000. Yours, you can reconfigure it as you like. Just make sure in your Vue.js project, in your env, you reconfigure the EBS URL if you do change it, because by default it's 3000, so I've left it at that. So now my front end and back end are running locally. I should be able to go to, let's refresh the page here, to my profile and look at the panel extension running on my thing. That's my normal one. And here's the bottom. Okay, cool. So this is the panel extension. I've communicated with the backend, the local backend, and my backend's gone to the Twitch API, and it's gone and fetched all my followers. It's shown that I've got 40 followers, and it's just a long, big table. Not very pretty, but it's just something to help you guys get started and kind of interact with and get used to how the ecosystem works. The Twitch extension helper as well, I kind of mentioned earlier about actions, about followers following or doing particular things. Twitch, with this extension helper, do some amazing things and help you guys out. So for instance, I have a follow button here, which basically you'll run a method within my Vue project called follow channel. And this will go to the follows API file. And this will communicate with the Twitch extension helper and do the action follow channel. And it's a nice little UI pre-built in. I didn't do any of this, but you click this and Twitch will automatically show you this kind of pop-up. And it gives you a bit more ease of use. I don't have to do any more designing of that. I click follow, and then Twitch in the back will kind of fire me another webhook or something that I can detect that the person has actually followed me, and potentially show a message. Bits and pieces like that. Cool. Yeah, so please have a go. Please clone the repo if you can. Have a go. Investigate more about the Twitch extensions. Twitch also, if you don't want to test on the website, Twitch also provide an Electron web app to help you develop your Twitch extension. It's available at this URL. It's available on Mac, Windows, and Linux. It provides you with the ability to view your extension from the broadcaster's point of view and the viewer's perspective, because the broadcaster might have a bit more configuration or be able to see particular things as an admin. You are also able to edit the Twitch configuration service, be able to edit the different segments, and also you have a bit more to play with in terms of monetization, configuring bits. So I've not really covered today. This is kind of like one of the views you might see in the developer rig. As you can see here, I can see my Twitch panel.html. And you can also see configuration.html.
Jack, unfortunately, the time's up now.
Okay.
So one thing I would probably say, someone asked if it was possible to share the screen. So I noticed that you had quite a few links and things. So it would be great if you, do you think you will be able to share the slides? And also if you can post in the comments the GitHub repo, the link for the repo, if it's possible.
Yeah, that's totally fine. No, thank you guys for listening. I'm sorry it ran over a bit of time.
It's just a couple of minutes is more than welcome. So it was, it was great to see what you can do in just a few minutes, and it's nice to see also the amount of viewers and usage that your little extension has. So it's great, fantastic. What the power of you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
So unfortunately, as I say, we are, there's a question for you, Jack. Just one question, as we're a little bit late. So from Derek, so who's your favorite Vue-related streamer on Twitch? You must know.
Honestly, not really. If I watch Twitch, it would only be gamers. There is a chap called Andy, I think, from Twitch, who kind of does developer sessions, and he has done a tutorial on Twitch extensions using Vue.js before. But yeah, more or less me would be anyone who uses my extension that I'd watch, really, to be honest.
Fantastic. It's great. So it's time now to move on to our next speaker, and it's Thorsten.
Hi.
So I'm going to share your screen. So amazing. It's good. So Thorsten, the name of the talk is Accessibility Bare Bones Component with Vue 3, Insight into a Work in Progress. So, as I mentioned before to yourself, Thorsten, I'm always looking forward for more information about accessibility, and it's always great to see people getting involved in this. So, I will be asking questions.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I changed the title in a word or so. I couldn't even really remember. Yeah, I'll be talking about accessible baseline components or bare bones components for Vue 3. It's a work in progress. It's just a project that I was tinkering around, and it's proven to be viable, hopefully. And so I'll continue to work on it, but it's not like something is already ready that you can npm install. But I hopefully will be there in the next coming weeks. So yeah, let's get into it. It all started for me like in December last year, and I saw a few talks on accessibility, and I wrote a few blog posts and stuff, and I realized I don't really know enough about accessibility. I know like a few basics, but I really lack understanding about how to design accessible interactive widgets, UI elements like tabs or what have you. And so I started to read a bit into this, and I started with the authoring practices from the W3C, which is kind of really extensive and goes into much detail. But I also realized that over time that not all of the examples are working well in reality and conflict with what screen readers do, and so it's a really complicated topic. But I also wanted to start dogfooding Vue 3 around the same time, because we had the alpha going and it was already going pretty well, and I just wanted to verify that what we were building is a good thing, and wanted to accustom myself from the user's perspective with this tool. So for everyone not familiar, dogfooding is basically just saying that you eat your own dog food, so work with your own tools to build something. And that's kind of like where I had the idea that just for me personally, I should try to combine accessibility, to learn something about it with Vue 3, specifically trying out to build accessible stuff with the composition API, and also while I'm at it, like get more familiar with TypeScript, because while TypeScript and me are becoming good friends in the last year, I still wouldn't consider myself an expert, and so I thought, yeah, this sounds like fun, right? It turns out accessibility is really, really hard, so it was kind of frustrating in many moments, but it's still a lot of fun, because it's just a really, really interesting topic with so much to learn, and I just like to learn stuff. So I continued on this journey. And what did I do? Well, of course, I started to build my own component library, because what else does the web developer do, right? It's still a work in progress. The repo is still private, but it will be public by the end of the night, hopefully, even though for now it's just something to look at, because there's no package on NPM or anything. But we'll get to that later in the talk. This is one of my favorite XKCD comics, and so I started. I also thought about, should I do another component library? There are like 1,500 component libraries, and when I'm finished, there will be probably 1,501 component libraries. But for me personally, the goal was just to use this as a way of learning. So if the end product is something that people might consider useful, that's great. But for me, the learning and the growing perspective for myself is the motivating factor at this point, even though I have kind of a feeling that it could be something useful for some situations or some users. So what is the goal? What I'm trying to build? As an example, if you're trying to build a list box, you would get from this library a couple of components, a list box wrapper component, and for each list box item, you would get a list box item component, and all of the state management and the communication and applying of arrow navigation, applying of the individual required attributes for accessibility will be taken care of by this combination of these two components. And at the same time, these two components really just render plain elements. There's no styling, there's no opinion about how the list box should look or what the style should be. The goal is just to encapsulate the functionality, the accessibility functionality in these components, and leave it to the developer consuming these components to just style them however they want. So we're just looping over them, and then we just, and what you will get is the correct roles will be applied. The tab index will be managed, so as you move through these list box items with your arrow keys, the correct tab index will be applied to the element that is currently having focus. You will get IDs generated for you, so you don't have to worry about how to generate IDs that are truly random, that are truly unique because we need IDs to like manage all of the accessibility in various situations. Also, as an example, a typical area attribute is area selected because we have to mark which of our list items is selected or not. Now, you also saw that in this example, is creating a list element, which is probably not the best idea, but you can do it. And the struggle is always like, do you use the elements that are best suited for accessibility? Yes, please do so. But sometimes a design system or various circumstances force you to do some other HTML element. And the goal of this library is to give you the tools to apply the accessibility functionality to any kind of element and just turn it into an element that behaves like in an accessible way. So in short, there's no styling. You can customize the tags. No matter if you turn it into a div or into a li or into a button, it will behave like a list box item should behave, and it will have the appropriate accessibility roles, attributes, behaviors. Spacebar and enter will behave in the correct way, and so on. And all of the coordination between parent and child in this case are done with provide inject using composition API in the background. As an example of implementation, you could, for example, import the button properties and the use button function, which is a composable, and create your own button component that acts like a button, but also like an accessible button, but also does more. So you would just apply the props, and you would call the use button function, pass the props to it, and get back a set of attributes as an object that you can then just return, and then bind to a div that you want to turn into a button, or have to turn into a button because that's how the template is set up. So all of the components that I'm building right now can be used as a composable, and a composable is short for a function using Vue's composition API. You can that way pretty easily compose behaviors. You can create the behavior of a button and combine it with the behavior of another, and add other composition API features to this without using wrapper components or stuff like that. But you're not forced to use the composition API because you could, of course, also just instead import the button itself and then just wrap the button component with your own component and do something that way. So for some people, that might have the advantage of not being forced to use the composition API, but then that means that you now have two components to create one button, right? You have the button that I'm giving you, and you have your own component wrapping it. But that's a trade-off that is seriously to consider, depending on the situation. So now it's a quick demo time. I have a small demo application that is intentionally not well designed in a way. It's just there for me to test out all the keyboard navigation and stuff. And we'll just look at it quickly. So I just have to activate this key. I have this tool. I hope you can see this right here. It's showing me how the arrow keys are working, or which keys I'm pressing. So when we start, I have a little component that is a skip link, which is useful. It's hidden, but if you come with the arrow with the tab key, it appears, and it basically gives a shortcut to skip all of the navigation and go to the main content if you want to. So the keyword user doesn't have to do this to get to actually something else. And then we just have a couple of pages that demonstrate different features. We have, like, for example, we have an accordion with space key or with enter. You can open and close it. And actually, these are divs, right? They work like a button, but they are divs because maybe the design system expects them to be a div that you're currently using. Like a button doesn't fill the whole screen by default, a div does, things like that. And so, but you see, it's a div, but it has a role button, it has an ID, and it has this area expanded attribute. And depending on whether I click it or not, it's becoming true or false. So that tells the accessibility software, hey, with this button, there's also something linked that is appearing or disappearing when you click on it. And you can use the arrow keys up and down to navigate between the headers. By the way, I hope you're not hearing my cat because she's screaming in the background. If so, sorry for that. She can be quite disturbing sometimes. Yeah, we're going back. We have other things like popovers, which is basically just a generic component to build pop-ups, things like tooltips, drop-downs, and just see that we can activate them with the enter of the space key, and the focus moves into the pop-up so that the accessibility software realizes that it's now in a different context. When I press the escape key, it's closing, and the focus is jumping back to the button, just so you don't get lost because the pop-up is disappearing, then the, yeah, stuff like that. We can have list box, navigate with the arrow keys, we can select and deselect. And all of the styling, by the way, this is just a few Tailwind properties that I added. The elements themselves don't come with any styles. So this is just a bit of Tailwind that I added to style these. Yeah, I suppose these have different modes. Like this is auto-selecting, so while you move through the list with the arrow keys, it's selecting the correct elements. You can have a list box that is where you can select multiple things like that. Yeah. So you can install the repo. You can. I have a small, short instructions in the main README about how to start this if you want to play with it. But I don't want to go into too many of the details because that would take too much time probably. But what I can say is that it was really a challenge for me personally to find a way to abstract this arrow navigation away in a way that is providing all of the different kinds of arrow navigation that are within the ARIA spec. And also these things kind of don't always match what screen readers really do. For example, here I'm using for the tabs the right and left keys to actually move through between the tabs, but that breaks the behavior of Mac's voiceover because Mac's voiceover uses the left and right arrow keys to actually move between single letters in a word. So that totally breaks this. So you really have to also allow up and down keys to move here, and probably rather disable left and right keys if you want it to work with voiceover. So you're already seeing that while the spec for ARIA says, hey, a tab can be navigated with the left and right keys, the screen reader that Mac users are using doesn't actually work with that. Yeah, so you have different kinds of limitations that you actually have to check out. So we have a disabled tab. Here, the tab B is disabled, so it's not included in the tab order. It's jumped over. You can also tell it to be disabled but still be focusable. That would move it back into the tab order. And yeah, so that's basically it, right? But all of these styles are just a couple of Tailwind classes added to it. If we were to stop using Tailwind like this, like I'll just comment it out, then we would end up with something like this. So the green background is just something that is still in the example components, single file component style tag. So ignore that, but the rest is just really text. So this is what you would get basically if you don't apply your own styles. It's just the functionality. It's not coming with any layout or design. Yeah, so that's just a quick run through of what I'm working on. All of this is using Composition API. So for example, if we have, as an example, where is it? This is, right? I have a toggle button, which is like a button, but it also has a V model, except the V model value. And when you activate it, then it gets the ARIA pressed attribute. And I'm building all of these components with a composable function, as well as a very small component that just calls this function to get the attributes and the behavior triggered, and then just render a single element. And that's basically the kind of setup that all of these components have. They render a single setup with no styles, and they have a composition function that encapsulates all of the behaviors that are required for the feature, including state management, including accessibility properties and stuff. And so you can, as I showed on the slides, either use the component or you can use the behavior and implement and import it into your own component. Yeah, so there's a lot of component that I'm working on. There's little to no tests because so far this was an experimental playground where I just keep breaking things, changing APIs. And I have to say TypeScript was really helpful in working this way because it allows me to write lots of code and change code in many places without a test suite and still have a good feeling about things still connecting together in a way that they're supposed to. So that was also a great help so far. Yeah, so that's basically a quick run through all of the stuff that I'm working on. And when we go back to the slides, I just have quick few things to share. Oh yeah, no, I wanna show one more thing. Dialogues. Sorry, I forgot that. So this was also quite tricky, but so this would be the modal dialog with no styles, right? Not really a modal dialog, but if we apply a couple of tailwind styles, that. Yeah, everything is slow because my old MacBook is kind of struggling with the streaming software. Then we have a nice little big button, and we have this overlay, and the focus is locked into this modal window. I can't focus anything else with tabs. Even if I were to click somewhere, it would either close when I click on the backdrop, but I couldn't select any of the other elements. It would just move the focus right back into this modal window. If I press escape, it's moving the focus back to the button, just so that the user of the screen reader or whatever knows that he's back on this button and not just back at the beginning of the page or something. Yeah, so that was just something that I also wanted to share. So what are the next steps for this? Well, I'll open the repo tonight. I just have to push the latest few pieces that I still haven't pushed so far. I already spoke with a couple of people that want to help out. So we're building a small team, hopefully, that will continue to work at this, working on a small roadmap for a first release. First release will just be a few components. We still have to refactor many things for this. Because it's a monorepo, we want to encapsulate all of the shared behaviors in like a utility package and then have individual packages for all the components that we will publish one by one. We need to get test coverage up, write documentation, and also get feedback from accessibility experts from our community because, as I explained, working with screen readers is challenging, even more challenging because you can't really, it's hard to get access to all of them and test with all of them. Some are Windows only, some are Linux only, some are Mac only, and they all behave kind of differently. So it's like Internet Explorer, but even more complicated. Yeah, so that's basically the things that we will be working on. As I said, it's just a work in progress. It's just an experiment, and I hope to get it to a stage where it's actually usable as a foundation to just build your own small component collection and just apply your own styles without worrying about the implementation of these interactive accessibility features. There's also previous art. There is a library for a collection of components for Vue, which is called Vue utensils, which does a similar kind of approach, but chose a bit of a different architecture here and there for Vue 2. And there are two projects in the React world that I'm aware of. One is Reach UI, and the other is ReactKit, which I also looked at quite heavily to just have a look at how they are solving a few things. So also pretty heavily recommended to check these out. And yeah, this is my Twitter. The second link is the repo, which will, as of now, not work, but it will work in an hour or so. Just give me a couple of seconds. Yeah, so that would be all for me. Simone, you can deactivate the slides.
I'm back
And then I
in.
can-
I'm back in. So fantastic. That was a great talk. And you at the start you say that you don't think you know much about accessibility, but I need to be honest, it was really good. I know how complicated and confusing can be to actually achieve some of those things.
I know more than I did in December. I did a lot of reading, really, and the lockdown actually helped because I have a lot of free time right now. So the project wouldn't be where it is right now without the lockdown. So
yeah. So if people are not aware and they've never been in accessibility, a project like this can actually save you hundreds and hundreds of hours because it can be very complicated to achieve some of those things.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as a drop down can be mind blowing. I will surely check out the repo. So, I'll take your word that it's going to be ready in a couple of hours, Thorsten.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question for you from Chitan. So, is it possible to automate the test cases for this components tab navigation, just to ensure the application is accessible?
Well, yes and no. So there are tools like, there's a tool that's called Axe, A-X-E, which also has a Vue plugin, I think, for Vue 2 at least, which does a very extensive accessibility evaluation. But at the same time, as I tried to explain, there are all of the screen readers, they have different shortcuts. They have different, they navigate the page in different ways. So you would have to find a way to test this with all of the screen readers that are out there and check if any kind of arrow key behavior that you implemented breaks one of those. And I'm not aware that there is an end-to-end screen reader testing framework like we have for browsers, like we have with Cypress, where you can take screenshots or movies. You can use Cypress, and we will be using Cypress to test them as far as we can. Of course, you can verify that the keyboard navigation works by using something like Cypress for end-to-end tests, but it's probably next to impossible to actually automate testing of the screen reader behavior. For that, you really would have to probably get experts involved that do reviews or regular audits of your application, which is something that accessibility consultants very often do, I think I understood, because it's actually quite impossible to test these things 100% for all of the application. You rather have to regularly get someone who knows, who maybe even is blind or visually impaired. These people often are perfect because they are the end user, right? And they can test your applications. So maybe it's better to reach out for an expert to do such an audit.
Yeah. And also, as you say, the documentation that you find on the internet is not always, they'll tell you to do something, but actually that solution may break some of the screen readers. So, there's no one better than that person that is actually using the tool to actually get some feedback out there.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And also, as you mentioned, Cypress is a great tool as well. So if you want to, you can actually set up all the testing in Cypress to actually go through by using tabs. So that's something, I know it's not as good as actually real accessibility, but that's something that can actually be interesting.
Yeah.
It's good. So
I just see that someone asked what the tool is that I use to show the keys. It's called Keycaster without the E. So Keycastr. It's a Mac application. Keycaster.
I think someone wrote it down. So yeah, just write it in chat. That's great. So great talk as always. You always come and exceed. I'm sorry for your cut. I think it's time for Imo here to get back in the room. It was really, I think every developer and everyone else likes cut, so it's fine. And it's been fantastic to have you and Jack as well, getting back on the stream. Jack.
Hello.
Great again to have you both on stream today. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for everyone that joined. And as it was mentioned before, the talk is actually going to be available on YouTube straight after this, I think in a couple of minutes as soon as we finish. So if you miss anything, just go and catch it out. And, it's always great to have you around and always great to see this fantastic talk. And it was also good to see the composition API in action. I think, I haven't seen So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, well, it was really one of the goals of the project was for me to like really test this in the real world and see where some of the challenges are that will come up, right? There will be some new patterns that people have to adopt to do things a little bit differently, and I just want to find out about those.
Amazing. And that's why you're here, and that's why you enlightened us with your talk. And same for you, Jack. Great to see how, easily we can integrate into Twitch. And, as Thorsten said, there's plenty of time with the lockdown, so we can all be streamers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So with these guys, I'll say goodbye to everyone else. Thank you so much for the talk. Thank you for being within the time. And I'll catch you on the 3rd Thursday of next month for another fantastic talk. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.